What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be going over my leveling build here for Season 4 in Diablo 4. And this is actually a pretty cool leveling build I put together. It is a Pulverize / Hurricane hybrid build that takes advantage of the Shepherd's aspect as well as the brand new Clarity passive we have for the Druid class in Season 4. Now, I did everything with this build in hardcore, and it only took me a few hours to get from level 1 to level 55 and right into tier 4. And as you can see in the gameplay footage, I was easily able to complete my very first tier 21 Nightmare Dungeon. Now, on my way to getting to tier 4, I was also able to complete pretty much any activity I wanted to. I was able to easily kill Hellborn spawns, complete the Blood Maiden event, and I was also able to kill the giant space cockroach that runs around inside of the Helltides pretty easily with this setup. Now, like I said, that wasn't hardcore, so you know that if it works in hardcore, this build is also friendly for softcore players. And in fact, you can probably get through your tier 3 capstone dungeon much faster, even at a lower level, say like level 50, because you really don't have to worry about dying and completely losing your character. Now, I will be releasing a full in-game build guide for this setup over the weekend, so do be on the lookout for that, but let's go ahead and get right into this setup. So as you can see here, guys, our primary skills are Pulverize and Hurricane. Those are going to be our big damage dealers. Then we have our resource generator with Storm Strike, and also gives us vulnerability towards our enemies. And then we're using all three of the companion skills because, again, this is a Shepherd's build, so we utilize the Shepherd's aspect to boost up our core skill and now wrath skill damage here in Season 4. Moving on to the spirit boons, we're using Weariness in the Deer. We're spirit bonding into the Eagle. We're picking up Iron Feather for the extra max life, as well as Avian Wrath for that multiplicative critical strike damage bonus. Then for the Wolf, we're going to be using Pack Leader to reset our companion skills so we can get more clarity buffs more often. And then on the Snake, we are running Masochistic, and this is really a flex spot. You can also run Obsidian Slam if you'd prefer. Moving down to our gear, we're going to cover the aspects first, like we always do. So for our helmet, we are running the Aspect of Might to give us that damage reduction after we use a basic skill. Then our chest, we're using the Undying aspect to give us that nice heal after we use a skill. Then on our gloves, we're using the aspect of the Earthsign Horror. That just gives our Pulverize a little bit of AoE damage as well as turns it into an Earth skill. Then on the pants, we're using the Eluding aspect, and this is just another source of Unstoppable if we find ourselves in a compromising position. However, it isn't necessary, and if you'd like to flex this out for a different aspect, you can go ahead and do that for this build. Then on the boots, we're using the aspect of Metamorphosis, and this just gives us more reliable ways of achieving Unstoppable with this build because we're not going to be using Bulwark, Trample, or the Grizzly Rage Ultimate. Then for our weapon, we're using a two-hand axe, and we are slotting in our Shepherd's aspect here. On our amulet, we're running Shockwave to give our Pulverize that extra damage and range. Then for our first ring, we're using the aspect of Stampede to further buff up our Shepherd's aspect by giving us an additional companion. And then for our very last aspect slot, we're running aspect of the Tempest, and this gives us a stacking multiplier towards our Hurricane damage, and Hurricane has been buffed quite considerably going into Season 4, not just with the Shepherd's aspect applying to wrath skills, but also with massive buffs going to the skills damage directly. Now we're going to go over our gear affixes, and the ones you want to prioritize for this build is Spirit per second as well as max life and crit chance, and pretty much every other affix is optional. And for tempering, I would definitely get Hurricane duration on your weapon, and then follow that up with damage to close enemies on every offensive piece of gear you can, just to buff up your Thunderstruck node. But let's go ahead and go over each piece of gear. So on the helmet, we're running max life, spirit per second, armor, and then of course we're getting max life for a defensive tempering. Then for the chest armor, we're doing spirit per second, max life, resistance to all elements, and then again more max life for our tempering. Then on the gloves, we got crit strike chance, ranks to Pulverize, willpower, and damage to close enemies for our tempering. Then on the pants, we have max life, life per second, willpower, and again, tempering here, we want max life. On the boots, we're going with the attacks, reduce evades cooldown. However, you can also run the evade stacks if you prefer. Then we're going movement speed, spirit per second, ranks to Hurricane, and the mobility tempering for more movement speed. On the weapon, again, this is a two-handed axe to give us that extra damage towards healthy enemies. Then we're going crit strike damage, willpower, max life, and of course, Hurricane duration. Onto the amulet, we're going movement speed, crit strike chance, ranks 2 in venom, and then of course damage to close enemies for our tempering. And then lastly, for both of our rings, we're looking for that fire resistance affix just for the Elias fight. And then for both of our rings, we're running max life, crit strike damage, crit strike chance, and the damage to close enemies tempering. Now down to our gems, we're running Sapphire on the weapons to give us that critical strike damage buff. Then we're running Rubies on the armor to increase our max life. And again, if you're running this build in softcore, you can easily swap these out for Sapphires to boost up your willpower. And then onto the jewelry pieces, we're running Diamonds just to give us all resist, because armor is super easy to obtain in Season 4. So we're really looking to cap out our resistances as early as possible. And obviously that's going to be done using Diamonds. And then down here at the very bottom is just a simple explanation of how to utilize this build. So again, this build is going to be capitalizing on the Clarity passive. So what you're going to want to do when you're using this build is cast a companion skill before you cast your Hurricane. And prioritize doing that so you get the most out of your Hurricane damage. And then as you can, cast a companion skill between each of your Pulverize casts, just again to buff up the damage of your Pulverize skill. But do prioritize Hurricane because that is going to be pumping out a lot of AoE damage, which is going to help you clear enemies much faster. Now with this build, I was easily able to level from 1 to 55 within a few hours and get right into tier 4. And I was able to do that while being pretty busy. So this is a very casual friendly build. And again, it's good whether you're playing hardcore or softcore. Now for the skill tree, and you can go ahead and use the leveling path slider just to show you exactly how I leveled this up. But we're just going to go over the skill tree really fast. So we're going to be picking up Storm Strike and then going into Fierce Storm Strike so we get that vulnerability on our enemies. Then we're grabbing up 5 points Pulverize into Primal Pulverize just to give us that damage reduction. And then 1 point Heart of the Wild into 3 points Wild Impulses because it finally works and gives us a multiplier towards our core skills. And then 1 point Predatory Instinct and 3 points Iron Fur to give us that nice damage reduction while we're in Werebear form. Moving down to our defensive skills, we're going 3 points Ancestral Fortitude just to buff up our resistance to all elements. Then down to the companion tree, we're grabbing 1 point Wolves, 1 point in a Poison Creeper going into Brutal Poison Creeper for the critical strike chance increase towards enemies affected by the active skill of Poison Creeper. And then we're grabbing 1 point Ravens into Brutal Ravens just to buff up our Shepherd's aspect by getting those 2 additional Ravens. Then for the Clarity passive, obviously we are going to grab all 3 ranks in this, and I would prioritize this one as well as Iron Fur. Those 2 passives are probably the best overall passives for the build. Then moving down into our Wrath tree, we're grabbing 5 points into Hurricane into Savage Hurricane for the damage reduction. Then we're going 1 point Mending into 3 points Provocation for the guaranteed overpower. Then 3 points Crushing Earth, 3 points Stone Guard, and 1 point Safeguard, which really helps build up our Fortify rather quickly because we're using the aspect of Earth Sign Horror, which turns our Pulverize into an Earth skill, so we actually get quite a bit out of Safeguard in terms of building our Fortify and keeping it topped up. Then we're grabbing 1 point Neurotoxin and 3 points in Venom. Then moving down to our ultimate skill tree, we're going 3 points into Defiance and then 1 point into Circle of Life. And then finally for our key passive, we're using Earth Sign Horror to get that big chunk of additional max life while we're in Werebear form, as well as that big multiplier towards not just our overall damage, but our overpower damage. Now, if you would like to, you can go ahead and use Bestial Rampage if you would prefer to have a much higher damage multiplier. I personally like Earth Sign Horror just because it makes us a lot more tanky, and I like to have that extra tankiness because I play in hardcore. Now for our Paragon board, guys, and this one uses every single skill point up to level 55. So we're grabbing as many magic nodes that gives us max life here that we can. And then we're also going to be slotting in a glyph here. I have Werebear here, but really any glyph that will give you some damage reduction will be pretty good here. And then from there, we're going to be moving into our Thunderstruck board and right into the legendary Thunderstruck node to give our Hurricane a massive damage multiplier. Now, the way I would do this is I would prioritize getting the Thunderstruck node first, just so you have a much easier time going through the early game content before you reach tier 4. So what you should probably do is just path your way up through your starter board into the Thunderstruck board and pick up the legendary node, and then go ahead and fill the rest of it out the way you would like to. And this should really help speed up your leveling process into tier 4. But anyways, guys, that's all for the video. That is my level 1 to 55 hybrid Pulverize Hurricane build for this season. I will probably be using this build the entire time I play the Druid to level up the class. It's been a lot of fun, and it's super tanky and does quite a bit of damage and clears all the content really quick. Now, like I said, I will be posting a complete build guide for this setup over the weekend, and I hope to have it to you guys early Saturday morning, so that way if you do like this build, you can go ahead and try it out. And I'll also be posting a video tomorrow covering some general tips for Season 4, and I actually have quite a few builds planned for this season, so hopefully I can bring you guys a lot of really cool builds and maybe even inspire you to make a few of your own. But as always, guys, I hope you're having a great day or a great night, depending on wherever you're from, and peace out, guys. I will see you in the next one.